The moment Jake Miller carried the unconscious girl into the emergency room, everything changed. His decision to help a stranger would ripple through both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. If you've ever wondered whether one simple act of kindness could transform multiple lives, this story will show you just how powerful compassion can be. If this story of unexpected connection moves you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more heartfelt stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Jake Miller's shoulders ached as he trudged home from his second job. The November wind bit through his worn jacket, but he couldn't justify spending money on a new one when Ethan needed new winter boots. Being a single father to a 10-year-old boy meant constant financial calculations, endless compromises, and a perpetual feeling that he was always one emergency away from disaster. Tonight had been particularly grueling. The restaurant had been short-staffed, and Jake had covered an extra section, smiling through his exhaustion as he served demanding customers. The tips had been decent, at least. Maybe he could finally replace Ethan's outgrown winter coat this weekend. Jake cut through Riverside Park to shave 10 minutes off his walk. The park was mostly deserted at this hour, just past midnight on a Tuesday. The streetlights cast long shadows across the path, and Jake quickened his pace. He was eager to relieve Mrs. Abernathy, their elderly neighbor who watched Ethan when Jake worked evening shifts. He was mentally calculating how many hours of sleep he could get before his morning shift at the warehouse when he spotted something unusual ahead. At first, he thought someone had discarded a pile of clothes on the path. But as he drew closer, he realized with a jolt that it was a person, a young woman, lying motionless on the ground. Jake broke into a run. "Hello? Are you okay?" he called out, but received no response. When he reached her, he knelt down carefully. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair splayed across the pavement. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy and pale in the harsh streetlight. A small backpack lay beside her. "Miss? Can you hear me?" Jake gently shook her shoulder, but she remained unresponsive. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, explaining the situation as calmly as he could. The dispatcher told him an ambulance would arrive in approximately 15 minutes due to high call volume. Jake looked down at the unconscious girl, then at his watch. 15 minutes seemed like an eternity. The temperature was dropping, and she was wearing only a light sweater. Without hesitation, he removed his jacket and covered her with it. As he waited, he checked her backpack for identification, finding a wallet with a student ID. Her name was Sophia Chen, a student at the local university. No emergency contact information, just a few dollars, some textbooks, and a half-empty water bottle. 10 minutes passed, and still no ambulance. Sophia's breathing seemed to be growing more labored. Jake made a split-second decision. The hospital was only 8 blocks away, he could get her there faster than waiting for the ambulance. He carefully gathered Sophia in his arms, surprised at how light she felt, and began walking as quickly as he could toward Mercy General Hospital. His muscles protested after his long shift, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He called Mrs. Abernathy as he walked, apologizing profusely for the delay and explaining the situation. "Don't you worry about a thing, Jake," Mrs. Abernathy assured him. "Ethan's sound asleep. You just help that poor girl." By the time Jake reached the emergency room entrance, he was breathing hard, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cold. "Please, she needs help," he gasped to the triage nurse. "I found her unconscious in the park." Everything moved quickly after that. Nurses took Sophia from his arms, placing her on a gurney and wheeling her away. Jake stood in the middle of the busy emergency room, suddenly uncertain what to do. He had done his part, hadn't he? He could go home now, check on Ethan, get some sleep before his morning shift. But something kept him rooted to the spot. What if she woke up alone and confused? What if she had no one to call? Jake approached the reception desk. "The young woman I just brought in, Sophia Chen. Could you let me know if she's okay? I found her ID in her backpack." The receptionist looked up at him. "Are you family?" "No, I found her." "I'm sorry, sir, but we can only release information to family members." Jake nodded, understanding the policy but feeling strangely disappointed. He turned to leave, then paused. "Could you at least tell her, when she wakes up, that Jake Miller brought her in? And that her backpack is here?" He placed Sophia's backpack on the counter. The receptionist's expression softened. "I can do that." Jake finally left the hospital, walking home with his thoughts swirling. He hoped Sophia would be okay. He wondered what had happened to her, why she had been alone in the park so late at night. But mostly, he worried about what Mrs. Abernathy would think of him coming home at nearly 2 in the morning. To his relief, Mrs. Abernathy wasn't upset at all. She was sitting in his small living room, knitting by the dim light of a table lamp. "There you are," she said, setting aside her knitting. "Is the young lady all right?" "I don't know," Jake admitted. "They took her in, but they couldn't tell me anything since I'm not family." Mrs. Abernathy nodded. "You did the right thing, Jake. Not everyone would have stopped to help." Jake walked her back to her apartment next door, thanking her profusely for staying late. When he finally crawled into bed, his alarm was set to go off in just 3 hours, but his mind wouldn't quiet. He kept seeing Sophia's pale face, wondering if she was conscious now, if she had someone with her, if she would be okay. Morning came too quickly. Jake dragged himself out of bed, made breakfast for Ethan, and saw him off to school before heading to his warehouse job. The physical labor was punishing after his sleepless night, but he pushed through, taking an extra coffee break when his supervisor wasn't looking. 3 days passed, and Jake had almost managed to put the incident out of his mind. Almost. He still found himself wondering about Sophia whenever he had a quiet moment. Had she recovered? Did she have family looking after her? On Friday evening, Jake was helping Ethan with his math homework when there was a knock at the door. Puzzled, they rarely had unexpected visitors, Jake opened it to find a young Asian woman standing in the hallway. It took him a moment to recognize her without the pallor of unconsciousness. "Sophia?" She smiled tentatively. "You're Jake Miller." "Yes, but how did you?" "The hospital told me your name. And I asked around the neighborhood until someone pointed me to this building." She shifted nervously. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to thank you in person." Jake was momentarily speechless. "No, of course not. Please, come in." Ethan looked up curiously from his homework as Sophia entered their small apartment. "This is my son, Ethan," Jake said. "Ethan, this is Sophia. Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Ethan asked bluntly. Jake felt his face grow warm. "Ethan. No, Sophia is, well, I helped her the other night when she wasn't feeling well." Sophia laughed, the sound bright in their modest living room. "It's a bit more than that. Your dad saved my life." She turned to Jake. "I had a severe hypoglycemic episode. I'm diabetic, and my blood sugar dropped dangerously low. The doctor said if you hadn't found me when you did." She trailed off, her eyes growing serious. "Well, I might not be here." Jake felt a strange tightness in his chest. "I'm just glad I was there." "Dad's always helping people," Ethan said proudly. "He's the best." Sophia smiled at Ethan. "I believe it." She turned back to Jake. "I brought you something." She handed him a small gift bag. "It's not much, but I wanted to show my appreciation." Inside was a new winter jacket, exactly his size. "How did you?" "The nurses told me you gave me your jacket that night. And, well, I noticed it was pretty worn." She looked embarrassed. "I hope that's not too presumptuous." Jake was touched by the gesture, but also uncomfortable. The jacket looked expensive. "This is very kind, but I can't accept." Please, Sophia interrupted. It would mean a lot to me. Besides, I owe you much more than a jacket. Before Jake could respond, Ethan piped up. Are you staying for dinner? Dad made spaghetti, and it's really good. Sophia glanced at Jake, who found himself nodding. We'd love to have you join us, if you don't have other plans. I'd like that, she said softly. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Sophia was easy to talk to, laughing at Ethan's jokes and asking him about school. Jake learned that she was 23, a graduate student in social work, and that she had moved to the city just 3 months ago for her program. Do you have family here? Jake asked as they cleared the dishes. Sophia shook her head. My parents are in California. They wanted to fly out when the hospital called them, but I convinced them I was fine. She hesitated. To be honest, I've been feeling a bit isolated here. It's been harder to make connections than I expected. Jake understood that feeling all too well. Since his wife had left 4 years ago, his world had narrowed to work and Ethan. Friends, dating, social life, all of it had fallen away in the struggle to simply keep their heads above water. Well, you've made 2 connections now, he said, gesturing to himself and Ethan, who was showing Sophia his collection of rocks in the living room. Sophia's smile was warm. Yes, I have. When she left that evening, she insisted on exchanging phone numbers. Just in case I have another medical emergency, she joked, but her eyes were serious. Or, you know, if you and Ethan want company for dinner again sometime. Jake found himself smiling. I'd like that. The following week, Jake received a text from Sophia asking if he and Ethan would like to join her for a free concert in the park on Saturday afternoon. Jake hesitated. He had picked up an extra shift at the warehouse, but he could probably find someone to cover it. And Ethan had been talking about Sophia all week. They met at the park entrance, Sophia waving enthusiastically when she spotted them. She had brought a blanket and a picnic basket. I thought we could make an afternoon of it, she explained. The concert was a local jazz ensemble, and while Ethan quickly grew bored with the music, he was delighted by the elaborate lunch Sophia had packed, sandwiches cut into dinosaur shapes, homemade cookies, and fresh fruit. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, Jake said as Ethan ran off to play with some other children nearby. Sophia shrugged. I enjoy cooking, but it's not much fun cooking for one. Besides, I wanted to do something nice for you both. As they talked, Jake found himself opening up about his struggles as a single parent, the financial pressures, the constant juggling of work and parenting, the loneliness. What happened with Ethan's mom, if you don't mind me asking? Sophia asked gently. Jake sighed. Lisa left when Ethan was 6. She said she wasn't cut out for motherhood, for the responsibility of it all. She moved to Seattle with a guy she met online. Sends Ethan a birthday card most years, but that's about it. Sophia's expression was sympathetic but not pitying. That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you. It was. Still is, sometimes. Ethan doesn't talk about it much, but I know he thinks about her. Jake watched his son playing tag with a group of children. I try to be enough for him, but sometimes I worry. From what I can see, you're doing an amazing job, Sophia said. Ethan is a wonderful kid, kind, confident, happy. That's because of you, Jake. Her words warmed something in him that had been cold for a long time. Over the next few weeks, Sophia became a regular presence in their lives. She would stop by with dinner when Jake was working late. She helped Ethan with his science project. She even convinced Jake to let her teach him to cook a few simple meals beyond his standard repertoire of spaghetti and grilled cheese. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Sophia and Jake sat on his small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine. Can I ask you something? Sophia said, her voice quiet in the night air. Of course. Why did you help me that night? You could have just called an ambulance and continued home. Jake considered the question. Honestly, I didn't really think about it. You needed help, and I could help. It was that simple. Sophia studied him in the dim light. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Carrying a stranger to the hospital after working a double shift? That's extraordinary, Jake. He shook his head, uncomfortable with the praise. It's what anyone should do. But not what everyone would do, she insisted. You're a good man, Jake Miller. There was something in her voice, in the way she looked at him, that made his heart beat faster. Without thinking, he leaned forward and kissed her. For a moment, she responded, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. Then she gently pulled away. Jake, she said softly. I care about you and Ethan so much. But I need to be honest with you. His stomach tightened. What is it? Sophia took a deep breath. My medical situation is more complicated than I've let on. The hypoglycemic episode wasn't just a one-time thing. I have type 1 diabetes, and lately, it's been difficult to manage. I'm on a waiting list for a pancreatic islet cell transplant. Jake frowned. What does that mean, exactly? It means that my condition is serious. The transplant could help, but there are risks, and the waiting list is long. She looked down at her hands. I don't know what my future looks like, Jake. And you and Ethan have already been through so much. The last thing I want to do is bring more uncertainty into your lives. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Sophia, life is uncertainty. I learned that when Lisa left. I learned it again when I found you in that park. He took her hand. I can't predict the future either. But I know that meeting you has brought something good into our lives. Something I didn't even realize was missing. Tears shimmered in Sophia's eyes. I'm scared, Jake. Not just of my health, but of letting people get close, of letting them down if things go badly. I understand fear, he said gently. I've been afraid every day since Ethan was born, afraid I won't be enough, afraid I'll make the wrong decisions, afraid of what the future holds. But I've learned that you can't let fear stop you from living. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, then leaned forward and kissed him again, a kiss full of vulnerability and hope. The following months brought changes, both challenging and beautiful. Sophia's health fluctuated, with good days and bad. There were frightening trips to the emergency room when her blood sugar crashed, and quiet evenings at home when she was too exhausted to do more than rest on the couch while Jake and Ethan moved quietly around her. But there was joy too. Sophia's presence brought laughter back into their small apartment. She taught Ethan to make dumplings from her grandmother's recipe. She helped Jake apply for a supervisor position at the warehouse, which would mean better pay and more regular hours. She became, gradually and then all at once, part of their family. 6 months after that fateful night in the park, Sophia received the call they had been waiting for. A donor match had been found for her transplant. The procedure was scheduled for the following week. The night before her surgery, Jake and Ethan brought dinner to her apartment. They had made all her favorites, though Sophia could barely eat due to pre-surgery restrictions and nerves. What if it doesn't work? She whispered to Jake after Ethan had fallen asleep on her couch. What if I go through all this, and nothing changes? Jake took her hands in his. Then we'll face that together. But Sophia, whatever happens tomorrow, you've already changed our lives in ways I can never fully express. You changed mine first, she reminded him. By stopping to help a stranger in the park. The surgery was long and complex. Jake and Ethan waited in the hospital, joined by Sophia's parents who had flown in from California. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by Ethan's occasional questions and the hospital announcements over the intercom. Finally, the surgeon appeared, looking tired but satisfied. The procedure went well, he told them. We'll need to monitor her closely for rejection, but the initial signs are promising. Sophia's recovery was slow and not without setbacks. There were infections to fight, medications to adjust, and days when the pain seemed overwhelming. But through it all, Jake and Ethan were there, bringing books and games to the hospital, decorating her room with drawings and photos, reminding her of all the reasons to keep fighting. 3 weeks after the surgery, Sophia was finally cleared to go home. Her parents had extended their stay to help with her recovery, but it was Jake who carried her bags into her apartment, Jake who made sure her medications were organized, Jake who slept on her couch those first few nights, just in case she needed anything. "You don't have to do all this," Sophia told him one evening as he prepared dinner in her kitchen. "You have your own life, your own responsibilities." Jake paused, wooden spoon in hand. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," she admitted. "But I don't want to be a burden." Jake set down the spoon and came to sit beside her on the couch. "Sophia, when I found you in that park, I had no idea how much you would come to mean to me and Ethan. Taking care of you isn't a burden, it's a privilege." Tears filled her eyes. "I've spent so much of my life feeling like my illness defined me, like it made me someone to be pitied or avoided. But you've never looked at me that way. Because that's not who you are," Jake said simply. "You're the woman who makes Ethan laugh until milk comes out his nose. You're the woman who convinced me I could be more than just a warehouse worker. You're the woman I've fallen in love with." The words hung in the air between them, unexpected but undeniable. "I love you too," Sophia whispered. "But Jake, my health is part of you, but not all of you," he finished. "We'll face whatever comes together." As the months passed, Sophia's health stabilized. The transplant wasn't a cure, but it made her condition more manageable. There were still difficult days, still medical appointments and medications, but there were more good days than bad now. 1 year to the day after Jake had found Sophia in the park, he took her back there. Ethan was spending the night with Mrs. Abernathy, who had become something of a grandmother figure to all of them. They walked hand in hand along the path where their story had begun. The autumn air was crisp, the trees ablaze with color. Jake led Sophia to a bench overlooking the river. "I've been thinking a lot about fate lately," he said as they sat down. "About how one small decision can change everything." Sophia squeezed his hand. "If you hadn't taken that path home that night. Or if you hadn't decided to thank me in person. Or if I hadn't been brave enough to be honest about my health." Jake turned to face her. "A year ago, I was just trying to survive each day. Working 2 jobs, barely seeing Ethan, feeling like I was failing at everything. And then I found you." "And I found you," Sophia said softly. "Or rather, you found me." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know it hasn't been that long, and maybe this is crazy, but when you know, you know." He opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. "Sophia Chen, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. "Are you sure? My health will always be unpredictable. There might be more surgeries, more hospital stays." "I've never been more sure of anything," Jake interrupted. "Life is unpredictable for everyone. What matters is who you face that unpredictability with." Sophia looked at the ring, then at Jake, her eyes shining. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the park where they had met. Ethan served as best man, proudly carrying the rings. Mrs. Abernathy sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes. Sophia's parents beamed with joy, having come to love Jake and Ethan as their own. As they exchanged vows, Jake thought about the night that had brought them together, how exhausted he had been, how close he had come to taking a different route home. One small decision had changed everything. The reception was held in the community center near their apartment building. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love and laughter. Jake had saved for months to pay for it, refusing Sophia's parents' offers to help. This was his gift to her, a celebration of their unlikely journey. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Sophia whispered in his ear, "I have something to tell you." Jake pulled back slightly to look at her face. "What is it?" "I got the job," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The one at the community health center. I start next month." Jake hugged her tightly. Sophia had completed her social work degree during her recovery, determined to help others facing medical challenges. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. And," she continued, "I've been talking with my doctors. They think we could try for a baby, if we wanted to. It wouldn't be without risks, but they believe with careful monitoring." Jake felt his heart swell with emotion. They had discussed children before, but always as a distant possibility, something that might not be medically advisable given Sophia's condition. "Are you saying you want to try?" he asked carefully. Sophia nodded. "I do. I want to build a family with you and Ethan. If you want that too." "I want everything with you," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything." 2 years later, Jake stood in the hospital room, cradling his newborn daughter. Sophia watched from the bed, exhausted but radiant. The pregnancy had been challenging, with more medical monitoring than most, but their daughter had arrived healthy and perfect. "She looks like you," Jake said, marveling at the tiny face with its hint of Sophia's features. "Poor thing," Sophia joked weakly. There was a soft knock at the door, and Ethan peeked in, now 13 and growing taller by the day. "Can I come in?" "Of course," Jake said. "Come meet your sister." Ethan approached cautiously, his eyes wide with wonder as he looked at the baby. "She's so small. Do you want to hold her?" Sophia asked. Ethan nodded, and Jake carefully transferred the bundle into his son's arms, showing him how to support her head. "What's her name?" Ethan asked. Jake and Sophia exchanged a look. They had discussed many possibilities but had waited to make the final decision. "Hope," Sophia said softly. "Her name is Hope." It was perfect. Hope for the future, hope born from an unexpected encounter, hope that had carried them through challenges and would continue to light their way forward. As Jake looked at his family, Ethan holding baby Hope, Sophia watching them with love in her eyes, he thought about how easily this moment might never have happened. If he had walked a different path that night, if he had been too tired to stop and help, if Sophia had been too cautious to let them into her life. But he had stopped. He had helped. And in saving Sophia's life, he had found his own transformed in ways he could never have imagined. Later that night, as Sophia and Hope slept, Jake stood by the hospital window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was the park path where it had all begun. Somewhere out there, perhaps at this very moment, someone else was making a choice that would change lives in ways they couldn't foresee. That was the thing about kindness, Jake reflected. You never knew how far its ripples would travel. One small act, stopping to help a stranger, had created this family, this love, this life. Jake returned to Sophia's bedside, gently taking her hand in his. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Everything okay?" she murmured sleepily. "Everything is perfect," Jake assured her. "Get some rest. I'll be right here." As Sophia drifted back to sleep, Jake thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. There had been pain and fear and uncertainty, yes. But there had also been joy and growth and love, so much love. And it had all begun with a simple choice, to stop, to help, to care. In the quiet of the hospital room, with his wife and newborn daughter sleeping peacefully, Jake made a silent promise to never forget the power of that choice. To teach Hope and Ethan that the smallest acts of kindness could change the world, or at least, someone's world. Because that was the truth he had discovered on that cold night in the park. Sometimes, saving a life meant not just preserving its existence, but transforming it entirely. Sometimes, in saving another, you saved yourself as well. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the profound impact one act of kindness can have. Remember, we never know how our choices might change someone's life, or our own. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may you both give and receive the gift of compassion.